Trail Pioneers. Welcome to Red Ribbon Week, a week we take a strong stand to just say no to drugs and bullying. Did you know that Red Ribbon Week is a nationwide annual event that started in 1988 to commemorate the life of Enrique Camarena, a drug enforcement officer who died fighting against drugs. Today I'm going to read you a story, The Red Ribbon. The Red Ribbon demonstrates hope through cooperation, respect, and responsibility for each other. Because of these positive actions and beliefs, the kingdom in the story became healthier and happier. The central theme of Red Ribbon Week has always been neighbor by neighbor, ribbon by ribbon, we are united for drug-free youth. To encourage the positive factors that protect you, your family, your school, your communities, so that you can live a healthy, drug-free life. Now, on to the story. The Red Ribbon. Not long ago, in a nearby land, a good king looked out over his kingdom. From high in the castle tower, he could see everything: tall trees in the forest, beautiful gardens and farmlands, the crystal blue river, and all the people who lived and worked in the village below. One would think that with all these beautiful things in sight, the king would be very happy. But the king wasn't. Instead, the king was quite sad. All he could see when he looked out his window was a terrible sadness in his kingdom. Because the people in the village were afraid, the king worried and worried, and the smile he once had turned to a big frown. The king knew if he didn't do something soon to stop the sadness, he and his kingdom might never be the same again. So the king sent royal messengers to find the wisest, most powerful people in the land and invite them to the castle to help save the kingdom. He invited dukes and duchesses, princes and princesses, and lords and scholars. When they arrived, he gathered them all into a big room to tell them about the terrible sadness he saw from his window. My friends, he said, the kingdom has great forests with many trees for wood, yet I see people who have no houses. The crystal river is full of fish, and there are farms so far as the eye can see, yet I see many people who are hungry because they have no food. There are people from many nations with much to share, yet I see selfishness and fear. And the saddest of all, the king said as his frown grew even bigger, though I listen as hard as I cannot hear any children laughing, and I can see no children playing. They stay in their homes, afraid to come outside. My friends, I need your help. You are my last hope. If we don't stop the sadness, it will soon destroy the kingdom. The sounds of whispers filled the room, and the guests tried hard to think of a way that they could help the king. Your Majesty, someone cried, perhaps you should send a brave knight to conquer this terrible sadness. Yes, yes, agreed everyone. Surely a brave knight could save the kingdom. The king, sitting on his throne, just shook his head. I have already tried that. I sent the mightiest knight in all the land to conquer the sadness, but it was too strong, and my brave knight was defeated. I've got it, exclaimed another guest. Perhaps the kingdom is under an evil spell, and a great wizard is needed to stop the sadness. Again, everybody agreed. Yes, yes, surely a wizard could save the kingdom. Again, the king shook his head. I'm sorry, my friend, but you see, I've tried that too. The sadness is not an evil spell. The wizard could not help me. The king could see that even his wise and powerful friends had no ideas, and the frown on his face was now bigger than ever. Suddenly, from the back of the room, they heard a voice. "Your Majesty, I know how to conquer the sadness." Everyone grew very quiet, and all eyes looked to the back of the room as a man stepped forward from the shadow. They all stared as he made his way to the front. He seemed a plain, ordinary man, dressed in plain, ordinary clothing. Over his shoulder, he carried a curious leather sack. It was brown and exceedingly large. When the man reached the throne, he politely knelt before the king, who asked, "Do I know you, sir? Are you a prince, a duke, or a lord?" Before the man could answer, a guest shouted, "He's a magician! Look, he's carrying a bag of tricks." The king inquired, "Is that true? Are you a magician? Do you have magic that can heal my kingdom?" The man smiled at the king. "Your Majesty, I am not a duke, or a knight, or a prince, and I'm certainly no magician. I am just a simple weaver. I make cloth into the village below." "A weaver," marveled the king. Everyone started whispering again. The king squinted as he studied the stranger. "How can you help me?" the king asked. The man stood and explained, "Though I am not a king or a prince or a magician, I know of a great power that can stop sadness. Gather everyone in the kingdom and meet me at the castle gate as the sun rises. Do exactly as I say, and the kingdom will be saved." A guest cried, "This man was just a weaver from the village. What power could he have that we do not know about? After all, we are the wisest, most powerful people in the land." "There!" Another guest quickly pointed to the weaver's sack. "The magic must be in his sack." The room quieted once again. The king leaned forward and peered at the sack and asked, "Is the power to defeat the sadness in that sack?" The weaver thought for a moment and then slowly shook his head until the king and their noses were nearly touched. "And as I said before, Your Majesty, just gather everyone in the kingdom and meet me at sunrise, and you shall see." The king sat back in his throne and scratched his head. "This I have not tried," he thought. "The weaver's magic may be my only hope." Then he rose to his feet and he commanded, "Send the royal messengers. We will meet at sunrise and do as the weaver says." Wasting no time, the messengers rode throughout the land, telling everyone about the weaver and his plan to save the kingdom. The next morning, the king woke early and hurried from the tower. When he arrived at the gates, he could see that a large crowd had gathered, and everyone was excited about the weaver and his magic. Moments later, the weaver appeared carrying his big brown sack. The crowd stepped aside as he made his way to the gates where the king waited. The king, feeling the need to say something official, cleared his throat and said, "Loyal subjects, I give you the weaver." Before he could say more, everyone started cheering. The king raised one hand to silence the crowd, and with the other he pointed to the big brown sack and asked, "Does this sack contain the magic that will stop the sadness and save my kingdom?" Before the weaver could answer, the crowd cheered again. With that, the king stepped back and said, "Let it begin." By now, the children had wiggled their way to the front of the crowd and formed a circle around the weaver and his leather sack. With eyes wide, not making a sound, they watched the weaver kneel down and open his sack. Then he reached inside and gently pulled out a bright red ribbon. It was the most beautiful ribbon anyone had ever seen, and it looked like it could stretch for miles and miles and miles. The weaver had stood and held the ribbon high over his head. "In order for the magic to work," he said, "you must do exactly as I say. This ribbon must be taken through the village, down the streets, through the alleys, and across the fields. You must take it throughout the kingdom, from the giant mountains to the great blue sea. And remember this, the ribbon must never touch the ground. Now listen closely, for this is the most important part. Everyone in the kingdom must share this task. If anyone is left out, the magic will be broken, and the sadness will return. Then the weaver took the end of the red ribbon and carefully placed it in the hands of a small boy standing at the front of the crowd. He told the boy to take the ribbon and lead the way throughout the kingdom. After the boy had taken a few steps into the crowd, the weaver shouted, "Stop!" The crowd gasped as the boy froze, looking back over his shoulder, and the boy could see that if he took one more step, the long ribbon would touch the ground. The crowd was silent. The weaver said nothing. The king was speechless. Then a tiny girl stepped out from the crowd and, reaching out with her little hands, lifted the sagging red ribbon high above her head. Without a word, she and the young boy turned and carried the ribbon forward. Now everyone understood. One by one, the people of the kingdom stepped forward to take their share of the ribbon. The banker followed the carpenter, who followed the school teacher, who followed the blacksmith. On and on they came to carry the bright red ribbon through the kingdom. Before long, hundreds of people were holding the ribbon. It stretched from one corner of the kingdom to the other. They held it high above their heads, just like the little girl, so that it would never touch the ground. The king looked at the people and the ribbon stretching far into the distance. He looked at the leather sack and then at the weaver. "So," he said, "when does the magic begin?" "It already has begun," said the weaver. And with that, he kindly took the king by the arm and led him along the great ribbon. Before long, they came to a young girl with the ribbon wrapped around her shoulders. She stood shivering in a thin, tattered dress. Next to her was a man in nice new clothes, who could not help but ask, "Where is your coat, young lady?" It was much too cold to be without a coat. "I have no coat," the girl said. "No coat!" he exclaimed, waving his arm in the air. "Everyone should have a coat, and that includes you. You see, I am a tailor, and I make clothes, especially coats. I love making coats. I have dozens of coats in my shop. I have green ones and orange ones, large ones and small ones, and I'm quite sure I have one just for you. It would make me very happy to give you a coat to keep you warm." The little girl smiled. The king was amazed. It was the first smile he had seen in the kingdom in a long time. Even his frown was growing smaller. "The magic is working," he thought. Then he turned to the weaver and he said, "Please show me more." Next they came to a very thin old man, and beside him, holding the ribbon, was a round lady wearing a white apron and a floppy white hat. "What was that growling?" the lady asked. "Excuse me, ma'am," said the old man. "This is my stomach. I hope it didn't frighten you." "I've never heard such a growl from a tummy," the lady said. "Have you nothing to eat today?" "No," said the old man. "I've had no food in 2 days." "Heavens!" she cried. "No food for 2 whole days? Why, I can go no longer than 2 minutes without a little something to silence my tummy." "Allow me to introduce myself. I am the village baker. If you come to my shop today, I will fill your belly with warm bread and the finest cakes and pies in the kingdom." "Thank you, kind lady, but I have no money," said the old man. The baker thought for a minute. "My friend, I have an idea. I need someone to deliver my cakes and pies. If you will help me, I will pay you a fair wage. And then you can buy food and never hear your tummy complain again." "I'll do it," the old man said, and again the king was amazed by what he heard. His frown almost vanished, and he asked to see more. Soon they came to the Crystal River, where two men from different nations were standing tall and proud with their share of the ribbon. Neither man had said a word to the other. In fact, they were trying very hard not to notice each other at all. The man began to wonder how long they could stand there holding the river and not talking to each other. "We may be side by side forever," each man thought, "yet I cannot let go of the ribbon. I will not be the one to break the magic." As time passed, the men realized that their stubbornness was silly. If they were going to be together for a long time, they would be easier to talk than ignore each other. And finally, the silence was broken. "I have noticed that you have a beautiful garden on your side of the river," the one man said. "You are quite a farmer. I would like to be able to grow vegetables like yours someday." "Thank you," said the farmer, "and I see you have built quite a barn, and you have cut wood from tall trees. You are quite a woodsman." The two men thought for a moment, and each looked at each other. "I have an idea," said the farmer. "I can give you some vegetables and teach you how to grow a garden like mine, if you will show me how to build a barn like yours." "Show you how to build a barn?" The two men didn't ignore each other anymore. That very day they built a bridge across the river so they could share with each other. The king was delighted with what he had seen. His frown was completely gone and a big smile had taken place. The weaver and the king made their way through the entire kingdom. By now there was so much celebration. The people cheered and the church bells rang and horns blew, and at long last the king could hear laughter of the children. The sadness was gone and the kingdom was saved. The king and the weaver returned to where they had begun. Approaching the castle gates, they watched as the last person of the kingdom pulled the ribbon from the leather sack. But suddenly, the king began to panic. There was still more ribbon in the sack. "It must not touch the ground," he thought, and so he raced to catch it. But before he could reach the big brown sack, the last feet of ribbon lifted up and fluttered in the breeze. Slowly, very slowly, the red ribbon fell softly to the ground. The king dropped to his knees, and his sad old frown came back. A tear puddled in his eyes and rolled down his cheek. The last hope to stop the sadness and save the kingdom is gone. What on earth shall I do now? As the king stared at the ribbon lying on the ground, he noticed something. Something wonderful. People were still cheering. Bells were still ringing. Horns were still blowing. The children were laughing. Though the ribbon had touched the ground, the celebration had not stopped. "The magic is still working," the king shouted as he jumped to his feet. "My dear weaver, your red ribbon is more powerful and amazing than I even imagined. You must tell me how you made it. What is it? What is the magic? Where did it come from?" The weaver said nothing and simply held out his hand and pointed towards the people. The king was puzzled. "I don't understand." Then he looked at the faces of his people and he listened to their voices. A big smile came on the king's face as he realized the magic is not in the weaver's ribbon. The magic is in the hands and the hearts of all who embrace it. And throughout the land, from the castle to valley, from the Crystal River to the big blue sea, one person turned to another and to another with smiles on their face and laughter in their voice. They sang and danced, knowing that the kingdom was saved, and as long as their hearts were joined, together, they could conquer all the sadness and live peacefully ever after. I can't say the end because this is the beginning. Boys and girls, we have a fun week planned for you for Red Ribbon Week. Today you're going to receive a red ribbon from your teacher, and you should wear that all day. And Tuesday we're going to wear our sports or team shirts, and we'll all get stickers that say Team Up Against Drugs. And Wednesday is National Wear Red Day, and I hope everyone wears something red to commemorate and stand up against drugs. Thursday is we're going to stand up against Bullying Day, and it's going to be called Blackout Bullying. And everyone is encouraged on Thursday to wear black. We're going to black out bullying. Friday is Sock It to Drugs Day, and that's the day we get to wear our wacky mismatched socks and have fun and be silly. Teachers and staff are all encouraged to participate. Have a great day and happy Red Ribbon Week.